know that the European Union is trying, to establish some cheap manufacturing plants in Europe. And there has been some talks ongoing, maybe for an implementation in Germany, who knows, maybe in France. So I think there is also room for improvement in the economic cooperation between France and Taiwan and the
industry. And we need to have more industrial investments from Taiwan companies in Europe and in France. I think we could do more in that field, probably.
What industry you're saying?
By example, the semiconductors industry.
Semiconductors, electronics. Welcome to TaiwanPlus Point. I'm Catherine Liu. Since French President Emmanuel Macron was re-elected only last year, 3 delegations have visited Taiwan. Now, it could be a strategic importance to France and its new pivot role in the Indo-Pacific. Today, I'm very glad to introduce my guest today, Jean-Francois Casabonne-Masonnave, the French office in Taipei director, and also alongside my French colleague Arnaud Campagne on the show today. Director, my very first general question is, what is the message behind the 3 delegations to come to Taiwan?
So the first point I would like to remind you is that we had delegations coming in the past, but not that often, and it's more complicated to travel for the moment because of the COVID-19 situation. So of course that is the sign of a very strong will on the French side from the parliamentaries to come and to visit the authorities in Taiwan. The message is mainly a message of solidarity, of friendship, and based on our common values. This is something very strong. The 3 delegations insisted very much on that. What makes necessary for us to meet each other, including between politicians, is the values we share in the political field, but in the economical field, in the culture, scientists, etc. Because of the COVID, the borders were closed. It was complicated to travel. The parliament members were the first able to have the organization of that kind of visit. And that was very important for them to say that despite the bubble system, which was a source of frustration for them, of course, but despite that, they were happy to be there and to give this message of solidarity to the people of Taiwan. So as we mentioned before, you have to keep in mind that the delegations are members of the parliament. It is not the government, and as a democracy we have separated powers. So of course there's an mutual information between the government and the parliament, but the member of the parliament are there for exchanging views with the partners here in Taiwan, exchanging informations, and maybe making proposals when they are back in France, back in Paris, and they discuss with the government. But it's very important to have in mind that it is not the government which is visiting for the moment in Taiwan. So we do not expect very concrete results, excepting a new energy to develop that kind of exchanges and conversations in the different fields you mentioned. By example, you mentioned the war in Ukraine. This is very important for the French part to explain its view on the crisis we face. So, in my view, in my personal view, what is very important in the visit of those delegations, and 3 delegations in less than a year, is that it shows, first it shows a political will to develop the exchanges of political nature between France and Taiwan. And the second point is that it will help to have a new energy in the exchange. Really, you have to have in mind how much the COVID pandemic and the closure of the borders have been arming the exchanges, not only between Taiwan and France, but between Taiwan and the whole rest of the world. So there's something to rebuild, not in the friendship, which does exist, and the 3 delegations coming is the proof of that. But we need to rebuild the use of visiting each other, the use of talking to each other, and to discover each other and to build a new cooperations in new fields. And this is the sign of these 3 visits in a time where the borders are not still open, but will very soon, I hope. that it's just showing the way for the other in all fields of cooperation to come back to Taiwan very, very fast, very strongly, and on the other way, the Taiwanese decision makers to visit, to be back in France as well.
I see. Arnaud, what message does it send?
I think there is definitely a momentum right now among the French political class about the Taiwan question. So I think it's very positive for a French-Taiwan relationship. However, something that should be noted is that those parliamentary delegations are for sure official, but they do not commit French government. And also, one can mention that there has been two resolutions passed both at the National Assembly and at the French Senate in favor of supporting Taiwan's participation in some international organizations. But same, it's a positive sign, but it is not also, it doesn't commit the French government either. It's non-binding.
On a bigger scope, why is Indo-Pacific right now is a region of interest to France?
Before I answer that, I just would like to insist that the three delegations, the members of the delegation belong to different parties. Yeah. Some are members of the governmental parties, some are in the oppositions. So there's a kind of a consensus among most of the politicians, whatever their opinions are, to share this solidarity with Taiwan. Regarding the Indo-Pacific, we are a country, a member of the Indo-Pacific community. Yes. As you know, we have territories in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean. We have almost 2 million French citizens living in the region. So this is very important for us to be an active part of the situation of the region in terms of peace, in terms of cooperation, in terms of economic development. So this is not new for us. What is new is that the whole landscape is moving and we have to adapt to those changes. Since maybe 20 years, we know now that the center of the economy, of the global economy, is on the Pacific Ring.
So it's shifting to the Indo-Pacific in general, right? Do you feel this way?
Absolutely, and France as a sovereign country in the Indo-Pacific, as Mr. the Director just said, has also been trying to involve its European partners to come up with an Indo-Pacific strategy, which has happened last year in 2021. So as I said, I think one of the first pillars of the French strategy in the region is about security and defense. As a sovereign power, it wants to be able to maintain its sovereignty and to be sure that the region remains open and free of any coercion. So there is definitely a military and defense pillar in the strategy. Then there is obviously an economic strategy to have in this region of the world, which represents over 60% of global GDP, as Mr. the Director just mentioned. And I would say that France, as a middle and responsible power, is trying to promote multilateralism in the region, to make sure that no player can coerce any others. And finally, another important issue will be, I think, the global, climate change and global issues the world is facing right now. So those four pillars.
Director, does that answer align with your goals and mission here?
Yeah, of course, that's very important. Maybe I would add that we, France, have a special responsibility. As a permanent member of the Security Council in the United Nations, we share a special responsibility to work in favor of peace and development, as I said. So you mentioned, Arnaud, that today we are working on this responsibility together with our member inside the EU, and this is very important for our Indo-Pacific priorities. We have, and this is the complexity of the EU, we have different approaches sometimes, different singularities, which is a way to be stronger in our view. So our experience and our presence in the region is a way for us to work together with the other member of the EU in the region.
We've talked about the bigger picture here. Now I want to focus on more in Taiwan. So can we expect any policy change for Macron's second 5-year term toward Taiwan? Is there going to be any different?
Okay. Any change, I would be surprised.
Really?
But,
no change?
A real change if you call an improvement,
improvement is a better
that will be
accurate word.
yes,
Yeah.
that's there will be no shift. But we are working since a long time now on developing the cooperations, all types of cooperations between Taiwan and France, and we are ambitious. We want to do more, so we have to work more. And I think we received instructions to act more in the cooperation between France and Taiwan. And if there's a change, that will be instructions to do more.
Specifically, in what area to do more?
I will take a few examples.
Yes.
One of my priority, by example, is to develop the exchange and the cooperation between universities to have more
Academic-wise?
Yes, have more Taiwanese students studying in France, more French students coming in Taiwan. Of course, it was more complicated during the last year because of the COVID, but we need to have that kind of cooperation because that's the best way to know each other, to learn together, and to build the future. Mm-hmm. So really, this is one of our priority. We have a lot of Taiwanese students in the field of gastronomy, design, business schools, very successful. We need to have more scientists, we need to have more engineers. And this is where we want to work more.
Got it. All of that aspects, none of them are political. Do you think to enhance such cooperation, France have to pick a side?
Well, so I think like no one should expect indeed like a legal or very political shift over Taiwan-French relationship.
Yeah.
However, something that can be mentioned is that, in the latest revised French Indo-Pacific strategy, the Taiwan Strait has been mentioned. It was not mentioned in the previous version of this strategy, So in between, there has been like 6 months. I think like a few things happened. First, China has been increasingly, let's say, assertive towards Taiwan with more and more incursions in Taiwan's ADIZ. Second, many European partners, including Germany, the UK, and on the other side of the Atlantic, the US, have all sent warships in the South China Sea, as well as for the UK and the US through the Taiwan Strait. Mm-hmm. And of course, something else which happened and which was seen a little bit as an humiliation at first by France was the AUKUS alliance and the cancellation of the submarine contract by Australia. So all those things happened. And France came up with a new and a revised Indo-Pacific strategy in February 2022, yes, in which stability in the Taiwan Strait is mentioned. So I think that this is a strong signal that in our policy, official policy, we are aware of this issue and we are trying to act as a responsible power.
I see. So in this newest version, explicitly mentioned tensions in Taiwan Strait area. It's been emphasized, and France has been.
Just
yes.
One commentary on what Arnaud just said. The AUKUS was not an humiliation; it was bad manners, and we are working with the Australian government to open a new era of cooperation with the new Prime Minister, Mr. Albanese, who will be in Paris very soon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was important to insist on.
Why is this topic has been brought upon on this new version? The stability in Taiwan Strait area. I want to avoid the tension in Taiwan Strait area.
We always follow the same policy, speaking for France, which is to work in favor of peace, stability, freedom of navigation, and cooperation in the using the tools of the multilateralism. Mm-hmm. This is our constant policy since ever. This is why we are a permanent member of the Security Council.
It's a constant.
Yeah, that's a mission for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we are using all of those tools to reinforce stability. As a new field of cooperation, not really new, but on which we will work in the next weeks and months, I would say, and this is very specific for France and for Taiwan, we will work on human rights. We need to work more on that, not only using beautiful sentences, but being very concrete and specific in our cooperations. We have to learn together. We have to learn from each other because the experience of Taiwan in democracy is different from the French one. And the member of the parliament who visited Taiwan after the conversation they had here with the member of the legislative yuan, all of them told me, we have to learn from them. And on the other side, we have a lot of experience as well. So human rights would be a topic of cooperation in the next future.
It's such a good point to start with the area, the topic, the issue, human rights. Can you give me a concrete example? You say want to learn from each other.
Yeah, Taiwan has just created its National Commission for Human Rights.
Yes.
So it is just starting to implement those new rules, which we know very much since a long time,
yes,
because France is the member of the international organization. So we have that kind of experience that we can share with the institutions in Taiwan. We can also develop conversations very specifically. We face the same crisis, COVID crisis. And to fight against the COVID crisis, all the governments had to deal with the respect of freedom and liberties.
Yes.
Some government didn't respect it at all, and I will not name them. But we, democracy, we had to find the right equilibrium between the security, health security, and on the other side, the respect of freedoms, public freedoms. And facing the same problem, we used as a diplomat, as a lawyer. I know that the choices between the two countries, France and Taiwan, were a little bit different. And this is one example, very concrete, on which, after this crisis, we have to learn from each other. Facing the same difficulties we used for respecting the human rights, we have been using different solutions. How did you do? How did we do? We have to discuss on that, work on that together.
Wow, do you feel that sense of mission and its importance to establish this bridge to tackle this issue?
I think the director is right, and that the cooperation is very intense and active in those areas. Something which has not been mentioned is also maybe the economic cooperation. I know that the European Union is trying, to establish some cheap manufacturing plants in Europe, and there has been some talks ongoing, maybe for an implementation in Germany. Who knows, maybe in France. So I think there is also room for improvement in the economic cooperation between France and Taiwan and the EU and Taiwan in the coming years.
Are these the topics that the delegation is here for?
Not only, because the first point was really the message of solidarity, as I mentioned. But it is true that especially with the three delegations, I had a lot of conversations with Minister Wang Meihua and other people in charge of the economy in Taiwan. I would say that we already are doing a lot between France and Taiwan, between the EU and Taiwan, and the EU with the first investor, foreign investor in Taiwan, and nobody
Really?
knows that. Yeah, before USA, before Japan, it is the EU. This is a proof of confidence in the future of Taiwan.
Definitely.
Definitely. So this is very important. We need to do more. And I mentioned that when we want to develop the cooperation between universities in the field of engineering and sciences, I have in mind the industry. And we need to have more industrial investments from Taiwan companies in Europe and in France. I think we could do more in that field, probably.
What industry you're saying?
By example, the semiconductors industry.
Semiconductors,
electronics.
electronics.
Especially the industries of the future. So semiconductors, electric vehicles, hydrogen, all of that. All of those sectors of the industry which are developing very fast. Taiwan has very strong experience in the terms of the industrial development. We have a very strong force in the field of creativity, inventions. So when you mix the two aspects together, you have a very strong force. Today, the producers are going closer to the market. and the first market in the world is the European market. So probably the Taiwanese investors will be more present in the next future in the EU, and so we have to work on that.
Happen. It's not just a political slogan or an agenda that's been far away, right?
That's very important for me because we can just stop with beautiful ideas, beautiful words, but my presence, our action with the Bureau Français de Taipei, with the office, has to be very specific, very efficient, very concrete. This is why we are here for. If there's no concrete result, it doesn't mean anything.
So the war in Ukraine is still ongoing, and we know that France is heavily involved in this situation. How does that affect France's Taiwan Strait area?
Actually, Emmanuel Macron just said a few days ago that Russia cannot win the war. What does it mean? It means that we cannot accept that another country is forcing his environment to change by the single use of force, killing civilian populations, changing the borders and the frontiers. This is against all our beliefs, all our rules, all the world on which we have been working together since decades. This is why we cannot accept that. And when we speak about peace and stability in the region of Taiwan and in the Far East, this is exactly what we have in mind. We have to work for a peaceful world where we are looking for solutions, because sometimes the problem exists and we do not deny that, but we have to work together to build the solutions. And the use of force and the use of wars is not an acceptable way. So that's why there is a real impact. And I think that not only for France, but for the whole EU members. As we mentioned before, France is already in the region. So we had that kind of consideration in mind. This is maybe more new for some of our friends, members of the EU, but they are together with us.
I see. Do you see any shifts?
In the current situation?
Yeah.
Well, I think it comes back to what we said earlier. The military and defense areas are at the forefront of the French strategy in the region. And I think that over the last few years, France has actually stepped up its, I would say, power projection in the area with a system like in the South China Sea, for instance, military ships have been sailing those seas on a very regular basis, right? And over the last 3 years, in 2019 and actually this year in March, twice a military French vessel has sailed through the Taiwan Strait.
Okay, to a lighter topic. So far, we talked about some actual ties. We talk about academic exchanges, investment exchanges. What about cultural-wise?
Absolutely. And you know, for us, there is no exchange, there is no cooperation if we don't work together on culture. So as you mentioned, I try to be very concrete in my speech, and I will be very concrete. I will take two examples. The first one is that a few days ago I was participating in the inauguration of the exhibition on ghosts in Asia, because the collections are coming from Paris, from a French museum very famous in Paris, and we are very happy with this cooperation, because it's not only an exhibition that was in Paris which is coming to Tainan. It is also it is added with works of Taiwanese artists on the same topics, and so it seems to be a beautiful success, and we're really happy on that. And the second example, very important for us, is that next September we will open the second French school in Taipei.
Really?
And yes, and there is already one in the French section in the European school. But we needed to enhance the proposal for the parents. We have been working a lot with them, with the Taiwanese authorities, at the government, the city of Taipei. And what is very important, we have French Taiwanese families. And they want to have an education for their children in the two cultures. So these schools will be focusing on that, proposing education for the children in French and in Mandarin. So that's very important. So this is the kind of cooperation that we are working on to be very concrete, to be very effective in the cooperation. And of course, this is what we do in Taiwan, but we need to have more Taiwanese artists in France as well. We need to have more of those exchanges in the two directions.
Before we wrap everything up, when you tell me those goals and exchanges, I can feel the joy and excitement that you represent.
That's true.
Is it because you have some personal experience here in Taiwan, so you have this, sense of accomplishment that you want to achieve something?
Of course, I have to say that I love my country. I love to be in my country, I love to live in Paris, etc. So when I'm abroad, and this is my choice, I need to be in a place where I have the feeling, the hope to build new adventures, new solutions, new cooperations. And this is what we are doing here in Taiwan. And we are successful, and I have to say that maybe it's too easy for us here in Taiwan because we have partners.
Partners,
Taiwanese
yeah.
In every field of action. We mentioned the industry, we mentioned the culture, we mentioned the education, we mentioned the human rights. We have partners and we exchange. And for the first day I arrived in Taipei, the French people I was working with, they explained me that we have partners and it is always an exchange. So it makes things easier.
On the cultural side of things, actually the first time I met with the director was during an event held by the Taiwanese C-Lab, Contemporary Cultural Lab, which was a cooperation between the C-Lab and French Pompidou Museum's IRCAM Music Center. So you can see that this cultural cooperation is very concrete, things are happening. And also, we just talked about the fact that France is opening a new school here, but we could also mention that Taiwan has opened in the last year 2 Mandarin teaching centers in Paris, in Paris areas. So I think that is a strong sign of strong cultural ties also that we could mention.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus Point. I'm Catherine Liu. For more information, please download TaiwanPlus app. I'll see you next time.